7 innocent people. One common product. A city paralyzed by an invisible killer who turned the medicine cabinet into a lethal weapon. What started as a series of tragic, isolated deaths quickly escalated into the most terrifying manhunt in American history. The killer remained one step ahead, methodically lacing store-bought capsules with cyanide and leaving them for unsuspecting families to find. Despite decades of investigation, advanced forensic technology, and a massive FBI operation, the mastermind behind the Tylenol murders vanished, leaving behind a cold case that fundamentally changed the world of consumer safety forever. Subscribe to Mind 74. If this dossier keeps you hooked, subscribe, leave a like, and hit the notification bell. Comment below your thoughts on this mystery and share this video. September 29, 1982. Mary Kellerman, 12, woke up with a cold in Elk Grove Village, Illinois. Her parents retrieved a bottle of Extra-Strength Tylenol from the medicine cabinet. They gave her one capsule. She swallowed the medication and walked toward her bedroom. She collapsed on the floor before she reached her door. Her parents rushed her to the hospital. At 7 a.m., the hospital staff pronounced her dead. The medical team initially attributed her death to a sudden, unexplained medical event. That same morning, Adam Janis, 27, returned to his home in Arlington Heights after a postal shift. He suffered from a headache and took 2 Tylenol capsules from a bottle he purchased earlier that day. He collapsed in his kitchen minutes later. Paramedics transported him to the hospital. He died at 2:15 p.m. The doctors recorded the cause of death as a massive heart attack. They suspected no foul play at the time. Relatives gathered at Adam's house to mourn his sudden loss. His brother, Stanley Janis, 25, and his wife, Teresa, 19, developed severe headaches. Stanley took 2 capsules from the same bottle Adam used. He handed 2 capsules to Teresa. Stanley collapsed on the living room rug. Teresa fell beside him. Both were rushed to the same hospital. Stanley died later that afternoon. Teresa entered a coma. The medical staff contacted the local police. They noted the similarities in the victims. The investigators began to look for a connection between the 3 deaths. They discovered that all victims consumed Tylenol. This realization launched a massive investigation. The police alerted the public about the danger of the capsules. They broadcasted warnings across all Chicago media outlets. The victims had no prior medical history that explained their rapid decline. The authorities confirmed that the Tylenol was a common factor. They seized the bottles from crime scenes. Forensic experts began the analysis of the pills. They found that the capsules contained lethal amounts of poison. The killer systematically swapped the contents of the capsules. This was not an accident. It was a calculated act of violence against random consumers. The authorities realized that the contamination occurred at the retail level. The killer chose stores with high traffic. This ensured that the poison bottles reached unsuspecting victims. The police expanded the search area. They checked stores in Cook County and surrounding areas. They issued a total recall of all Tylenol capsule products. This recall covered millions of bottles across the nation. The panic spread as more victims appeared. Mary Reiner, 27, died in Winfield after she took a Tylenol capsule. Mary McFarland, 31, collapsed at her office in Chicago. Paula Prince, 35, died in her apartment. The death toll climbed to 7 victims within days. The FBI joined the local police in the investigation. They established a special task force to handle the crisis. The investigators treated the case as a national emergency. They analyzed the supply chain from the factory to the store shelves. They ruled out factory tampering after they examined the production logs. This focused the investigation on the retail distribution. The perpetrator walked into stores and replaced the bottles. The police worked around the clock to track the killer. They reviewed purchase records from all affected pharmacies and grocery stores. The situation remained critical as the death toll increased. The nation watched the news with growing fear. The Tylenol crisis became the top story in the country. Citizens threw away all capsule medications. The police set up a hotline for public tips. They received thousands of calls regarding potential tampering. Each report required a full forensic investigation. The strain on the department was immense. They coordinated with the pharmaceutical company to handle the aftermath. The Tylenol crisis threatened the survival of McNeil Consumer Products, and its parent company, Johnson & Johnson. James Burke, the CEO, faced the most significant challenge in the company's history. He convened an emergency meeting with the board of directors. Burke insisted on a strategy of absolute transparency, prioritizing public safety over the company's immediate profit. He ordered a nationwide recall of all Tylenol products, pulling 31 million bottles from store shelves. This was the largest recall in American history. The company communicated with retailers and distributors nationwide, coordinating the logistics of the retrieval and destruction of the stock. Johnson & Johnson launched a massive public awareness campaign, utilizing television, radio, and print media to warn consumers. The company set up a toll-free hotline to answer consumer questions and employed a large team to manage the influx of calls. The campaign helped to mitigate the panic across the nation. Johnson & Johnson invested heavily in the development of new packaging technology, collaborating with engineers to create tamper-evident designs. They introduced the triple-seal packaging system, including a glued outer carton, a plastic neck seal, and a foil membrane. These measures made the product significantly more secure and set a new standard for the pharmaceutical industry. Meanwhile, the FBI launched a massive manhunt. They assembled a task force of hundreds of agents who investigated thousands of tips. The team reviewed security footage from every store that stocked the contaminated Tylenol, looking for individuals who lingered in the aisles without making purchases. The investigators established a profile for the suspect based on the forensic evidence. The killer acted with professional precision, possessing a knowledge of retail store layouts. The FBI coordinated with local law enforcement across multiple states, expanding the search to include the entire distribution network. The task force analyzed the travel patterns of potential suspects, checking flight and train logs for activity near Chicago. The investigation became an international effort as the agents followed leads. The investigation took a dramatic turn with the discovery of an extortion note sent to Johnson & Johnson. The letter demanded $1 million for the end of the poisonings. The FBI traced the account provided in the note to a defunct travel agency. The owner confirmed that someone had stolen his business credentials. The FBI identified the sender as James Lewis, an accountant with a history of financial fraud. The agents tracked his movements through a series of Chicago hotels where he left taunting messages for the local media. The FBI initiated a high-stakes search for Lewis across the country. They arrested Lewis in New York City after a brief struggle that transported him back to Chicago. Lewis denied involvement in the poisonings during the initial questioning, admitting to the extortion but claiming he did not commit the murders. The FBI searched his former apartment for evidence related to the cyanide. They found records of his financial transactions. The federal prosecutors charged Lewis with extortion. The trial attracted national attention due to the high profile of the Tylenol case. The jury found Lewis guilty of extortion, and the judge sentenced him to 10 years in federal prison. This conviction provided a temporary sense of closure for the public. However, the FBI continued to probe his involvement in the deaths. They interrogated him repeatedly regarding the poisonings. Lewis remained evasive and refused to provide direct answers. The investigators examined his past activities for any mention of the cyanide. They found no physical evidence linking him to the tampering process. Lewis claimed he only wanted the money. He maintained his innocence regarding the killings until he left prison. The Tylenol investigation settled into a long period of dormancy during the 1990s. The FBI archived the massive volume of case files in the central database. The agents who led the original task force retired from their positions, and new teams took over. The case became a legend in the world of true crime research. Investigators identified other potential suspects through the years, including Roger Arnold, a former dock worker. Arnold had expressed anger toward his workplace and had access to industrial chemicals. The FBI monitored Arnold and his associates, performing a search of his residence, but they found no definitive evidence linking him to the poisoning events. The investigation into Arnold faded as the evidence failed to surface. The police continued to receive occasional tips, but found no breakthroughs. The case remained a cold case in the files of the FBI for decades. Families of the victims continued to ask for updates, seeking justice long after the tragedy. The FBI maintained the evidence in a secure storage facility, preserving DNA samples and chemical remnants. They waited for advancements in forensic science. The Cold Case Division periodically held meetings to assess the status of the investigation. In 2009, on the 27th anniversary of the tragedy, the FBI launched a surprise forensic review. The agency utilized the latest breakthroughs in forensic technology. The agents obtained a warrant to search the home of an aging James Lewis in Massachusetts. They seized his computers, old typewriters, and any suspicious documents. The agents aimed to find any evidence that could tie Lewis to the tampering. They transported the materials to the laboratory for analysis. The technicians looked for chemical traces on his older belongings and utilized new DNA sequencing on the evidence from the original bottles. This effort was the most extensive since the 1980s. The FBI agents interviewed Lewis once again. He remained consistent in his denial of the murders. The forensic experts worked for months on the new evidence, but the results were once again inconclusive. The physical evidence had degraded over the 27 years, and the data was too fragmented to provide a definitive result. The FBI concluded the review without finding the missing link. The case returned to the status of a cold case. James Lewis died in his home in July 2023 at the age of 76. His death closed the most prominent lead in the Tylenol case. The FBI had monitored him for more than 40 years. They never found the definitive proof to charge him with the murders. The mystery has entered the realm of historical fact and serves as a permanent reference point for consumer safety. The Tylenol murders defined the standard for the modern pharmaceutical industry and forced the creation of the tamper-evident packaging we use today. We perform the check of the seals every time we purchase medicine. This habit is the direct legacy of the 1982 crisis. The mystery of the 7 lives lost remains a part of the American experience. The federal government enacted strict laws against product tampering after the events. These laws changed the way companies monitor their products. The public trust in the retail supply chain had to be rebuilt from the ground up. The case remains the most significant unsolved product tampering event in history. We close the investigation with a respect for the lives lost. The dossier ends here, but the story of the Tylenol murders remains in the record for all time. Subscribe to Mind 74. If you reach the end, subscribe, leave a like, and hit the notification bell. Comment below your thoughts on this mystery and share this video.